I mean, when you think of the Paradise Garage, you think of one DJ, right? When you think of Sound Factory Bar, you think of one DJ, and the list goes on, not just in New York, but overseas too. So while I'm not trying to take anybody's money away and food off their plate, I feel I would like to see more promoters who are brave enough to say, no, this is my core. I hear something. I feel something. I think I could do it with this group. It's like building a team, like building an NBA team, you know, like you trust in their abilities, you trust that what they bring to the table is going to give your party, your brand, a certain personality, and you stick with it.
All right, so today is October 7th, 2021. Who are we speaking with?
I'm Henry Maldonado, these days known as Son of Sound.
How'd you come up with that name?
I've never recorded under my own, like, I actually wanted to just change things up. I recorded under a bunch of names. Rhythm Section, House2House, with two producer friends of mine, Deja Vu. And I just wanted to settle in on something that would allow me to actually experiment beyond the realms and the confines of any particular genre, just allow me to be free and do whatever I wanted. And my now wife said, why don't you just call yourself Son of Sound? And it took a while for it to sink in, because to me it sounded way too much like Son of Sam, and I didn't want to be you know?
Now, say that one more time. I think I spoke of you. It sounded too much like Son of Sam or what?
And I didn't want to be, you know, I didn't want to come off violent and crazy. Like I'm not, you know what I mean? So she explained it. She says, well, you know, you always talk about like how this thing just kind of raised you, you know, your parents, your musical influences, the house parties that your parents threw. And it was just like, you know, sound was raising you the entire time. And, you know, I ultimately built a career in sound, you know, either supporting the industry. I worked for several clubs. I worked for Nowadays. I worked for a few other places, and through DJing and making music. So if it's stuck.
I love it. I love it. Controversial question. Brooklyn or Queens?
Oh, man.
Because you've lived in both.
This is the foundation. I dedicated my record label name to Queens. It's called District 30. I have the logo is the Con Edison power plant sitting on Vernon Boulevard, just a couple of blocks away from Queensbridge houses, and nestled between my old housing projects and Queensbridge houses. So, you know, Queens raised me. Queensbridge, that Long Island City, Queens raised me. It was what was going on there sonically. Made me make better. What was going on there sonically in hip hop made me make better dance music. And when I moved to Brooklyn, though, the energy here, and just to be a stone's throw and an arm's length away from literally just about everybody, you know, it was amazing. And I just immediately felt plugged in. I can't do it, man. I can't say one over the other, but I claim Queens all day. It's where I'm from, but I love Brooklyn too.
Cool.
So I dodged that one, Louie. I know I did. The next controversial one you hit me with, I'm gonna hit you with a direct answer.
It's all good. I love it. I love it. I love it. Let's start from the beginning. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in New York, uptown, Mount Sinai Hospital. I grew up in Long Island City, Queens. As I mentioned before, my parents are New Yorkers too. They grew up in Spanish Harlem. You know, we're all Boricuas and raised on a diet of soulful Latin music, soulful Black music, you know, disco, funk, Motown, everything in between. So, yeah, New York all day.
And then what kind of music did you hear in the house growing up? You mentioned house parties. Was that a common occurrence? Were they at your house or somebody else's house? How did that work?
Yeah, my parents would get it in. They would throw these parties, invite the family and friends over, and my father had even a little DJ set up. He really didn't know how to mix, but he saw people he bought this little Clubman mixer, hooked up a pair of turntables, had a little record collection. In his collection was everything from obviously salsa music and Latin music, Hector Lavoe and Gran Combo, as well as, like I mentioned before, Martha Reed and the Vandrells and Diana Ross and all the cool Motown stuff, Teddy Pendergrass, and disco was a big thing back then, and there was plenty of disco music happening. The stuff the kids were listening to back then. My parents were kids, so it made sense.
Do you remember the first nightclub you went to?
Wow. Yes, I do. It was one of Louie's early spots. It was the Devil's Nest in the Bronx. Yes.
Describe the Devil's Nest.
So it was a small place. It was actually.
And tell people who Louie is. I know and but tell people who Louie is.
Oh, I'm talking about Louie Vega. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had a friend of a friend invite us up because I was young at the time, but New York, it didn't really matter back then if you had ID or not. You had money, they were gonna let you in. So we got in on the early side, and I've never been to a club in the Bronx before.
Do you remember where in the Bronx it was?
It's not far off of East Tremont. It was South Bronx, but more going towards north. Yeah, north. Mm-hmm. And the energy was magical, man. It's like sea of kids, just rowdy kids, partying to what he was serving up, which at the time was a lot of Latin freestyle. Which is a genre that often gets misunderstood. It's just an extension of hip hop. And
unpack that, please. Unpack that.
Okay. When you think about freestyle, you think about the cover girls and fascination, but you don't know. Nobody talks about how Thelma Houston made a freestyle record produced by Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. I'd rather spend the bad times with you. Xena, who did On the Upside, is Lisa Fisher. Amazing talent, and it was basically capitalizing on the electro-funk sound championed by Arthur Baker's influence from Kraftwerk and working with Soul Sonic Force, and John Roby programming drums that mimicked basically the drum pattern to the Mexican, which is a funk rock record, but because drum machines really were it was still crude technology. They didn't give you that human feel. They were very rigid and locked in. You got a very so everything was a little bit more, and you had those Latin elements, the Latin keyboards and the bass, and you basically got the ingredients of freestyle. So there was a lot of that. Louie played funk, he played breaks, he played hip hop, and then he moved to the old Funhouse on 26th Street after John Jellybean Benitez had left and Funhouse closed its doors. It reopened under a name called Heartthrobs, and my friends and I were there every Friday for Louie sets as well. So yeah, we followed him like sheep. I was part of that whole tribe.
Wow. And then how far after that was Sound Factory Bar?
Wow, that was later, actually. We were already making records, and by we, I mean my partners at the time, Rudy Straker and David Carter. We used to go under a trio called House2House. We were releasing records on Strictly Rhythm, under House2House and Urban Rhythm. And it was maybe 1 or 2 records in when we didn't even know about the night. We were so naive. We just go to Strictly Rhythm and just meet new people. And yeah, it was like, yeah, we went on a Wednesday to Strictly Rhythm to show some demos. And it was like, the conversation was like, you guys are coming tonight, right? And coming where, going where? Oh, to Sound Factory Bar. Yeah, sure, we'll go to Sound Factory Bar. So we got on the guest list and we went that night, the first night, and we were there consistently every Wednesday for years. It was such a memorable experience. That to me was like the heyday of New York house music back then. Yeah. That and The Shelter, of course, which I quit, like those 2 things happened at the same time for me. Going to Timmy Registered for Shelter at Hubert Street.
Let's go back to production. You talked about House2House. Did you guys also use any other pseudonyms, or that was the only pseudonym you used for production?
On Strictly Rhythm, it was Urban Rhythm and House2House. And then we did a couple of other records elsewhere. We did a record on Maxi under Deja Vu called Move Your Waistline. Springboard on a record label called RJM. And then Rhythm Section, we did that as a trio for a little while. And then I broke off on my own and I kept that going for a little while myself until Son of Sound came into play.
Wow. How many releases do you have?
I never counted, man. I'll be honest.
It's hundreds.
I don't know. I can't, probably. I don't know. I don't know. One day I will. I know I started a show and I wasn't consistent with it. It was during the pandemic, just to count down my releases. And I still had so much more music to go. Maybe I'll pick it up one day. I don't know. I don't have that kind of time on my hands anymore to just like count how many releases. I mean, that's what Discogs is for. Yeah, hopefully they got it right.
Exactly. Tell us about your production process when you're making a record.
It hasn't changed much. It's still very much the way I used to produce music when the technology was a lot harder to use, before computers, when it was just a sampler, a drum machine, or a combination of both, like an SP1200 or an MPC 60 or an MPC 3000 or something, where a lot of times I'm looking for textures in my drums that go beyond your basic kick and snare, and I'm chopping things up. I'm taking sounds, I'm taking loops. So it's a very hip hop style bed building in my music. And then when I hit play and I hear the groove that I got going, I let it speak to me. It tells me what chord progression it wants. It tells me what bass line it wants. It tells me what changes it wants, because, you know, that's the way music should be made. It's organic, you know? When you work with musicians and you bring musicians and you run the track and they're giving it the feel that the track is asking for. You know, they're writing the lyrics, they're writing, or they're playing on top of what the track wants it to be. Anything else is kind of a misdirection and a clash. So yeah, so sometimes I'll start out with just like playing a bunch of records and figuring out where I want to go. And sometimes it's old school and I'm just playing chords and coming up with a progression. But when I go back to the drums, I'm still picking up the old technique of sampling and layering sounds.
Do you consider yourself a DJ first or producer first, and why?
I don't see why one comes before the other, you know? And also those two things, those two things are not mutually exclusive. You know, just because you're one doesn't necessarily mean you should be the other. Larry Heard didn't care for DJing. Amazing talent, amazing producer. So many people just stayed in their lane and did what they did best. And then there are plenty of DJs that never made any records that were just amazing at it, But somehow the industry convinced everybody that you should do both or you could do both. And that's not necessarily true. DJing is an art form all unto itself, and so is production. I started out a DJ first, so I'm both, man, and I have an equal passion for both. These days, if I'm not playing for a crowd, I'm bored. So I lean more towards production because it's something that I could either work with by myself or with a few people on and come up with a project and release it to the world and get some feedback. But if the gigs ain't coming, then I'm not playing. I'm still buying music, but I'm not playing. But I love both equally, man. And I don't subscribe to the fact that you have to love one over the other, or be one more than the other.
I love that. Let's go back to production. How do you know when a production is done, and how long does your process take? Like, for example, do you wake up one day and it's like, oh, I have an idea for a hip house record and I have an idea for a techno record, and do you work on both at the same time, or?
I rarely have ideas. I really, it's always just experimentation. I come to the studio, I sit down, and I go through things. Like I'll listen, I'll experiment. And then when something starts to form, then the ideas start to happen. But the last time I did a record for Patrice Scott's label called Evolve. And it's kind of like a jazz thing. And I had the chord progression in my head. That was the last time I actually had something that was like, I gotta lay this down before it goes away. But honestly, I approach production very much from like a hip hop beat maker. I make hip hop too, it's kind of the way it works. I just listen to things and lift and borrow and mold and distort until something happens.
Damn, I want to learn. I'm at that phase now where I'd like, for the next chapter of my life, I'm gonna tell the editor to cut this out of the interview, but I'd actually like to learn. I don't want to make a career out of it, but yeah. I'd like to learn how to make music, And my mentality is more experimental too. That's my approach to photography as well. Like, you tell me the technical thing of like f2.8, that's garbage to me. I just know how to make a good picture, Yeah.
I know an amazing teacher. I mean, I could tell you I don't feel like I'm the best teacher, but I know somebody who was just great and actually just made a career off of just teaching how to.
Oh yeah, connect me with them after the interview. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, we can talk.
Yeah. All right, Ficret, cut this out of the interview. All right, bet. Let's see. We talked about DJing production. Let's take a macro look at another controversial question. Is there any money in house music?
What a question. Yeah, sure. And people are making it, There's money in everything if you put the effort in, if you can, if you have the drive and you're willing to do the thing, then there's money in everything. Money comes when the passion is there, A lot of guys would tell you that, you make great music for the music's sake, and they will come. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is basically just sitting down, creating from the heart, letting it pass your litmus test, putting it out to the world, and you do that consistently enough, then they will come and you will get paid for, can I get this remix? For, hey, can you play this set? For blah, blah, blah. So yeah, there's money. are there millions of dollars? Well, that just depends on what you're doing, you know? If you're doing the sound that we love and cherish, maybe not. But that doesn't mean that you can't be happy. And that doesn't mean that you can't get work. There are plenty of people working.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
Describe the feeling, what it was like to hear your record played in a club for the first time.
Oh, crazy. And I got a story, man. Shout out to Roger Sanchez. He was the first one I ever heard play my record in a club. And it was the Octagon. He had his ego trip party there. And I'm gonna look really bad in this story because Roger's such a nice guy. And I would have punched the old me in the face so hard for this move. But you know, I was a naive kid and I'm from the projects. And I don't know, man. I don't know if I just had this false sense of entitlement, but the man puts me and my boys on the guest list, and Hector Romero's there. We're learning who all these guys are, and Hector's Hector from day one. Kenny's there, Todd's there. Gypsy Woman first just came out, by the way. That's like the hit. And I got my record tucked under my arm, and I give my record to Roger Sanchez and say peace, bro, hug him, all the things. Go back down to the dance floor. You know, 11 turns to 12, 12 turns to 1, 1 turns to 2, 2 turns to 3. And I turn to my partners, I'm like, is he ever gonna play this? And like he doesn't even have to. I gave him the record. I wouldn't. I didn't know. Like I wouldn't. I would not play a record I haven't listened to yet or know that well, you know, unless it's just that crazy and I know it. And so I was convinced I wasn't gonna do this, but Rudy was like, my boy was like, yo, we should get that shit back from him. So I go back to the DJ booth. I go back to the DJ booth and I was like, yo, Roger, yo, you gonna play this record? And I never asked for the record back because at that point, if I'm me, if I'm Roger, I'm throwing the record at me. I'm like, yo, take the shit back, man. Like, you get the fuck out of my booth. But he turns around and he goes, oh, of course, man, I got you. I'm gonna play it next after the dance contest. And that was such a life lesson for me and the beginning of my like healing journey, I guess. Like, you know, I gotta check my attitude, man. Like, what's wrong with me? Am I crazy? So yeah, he played I Wanna See You Dance, and the hair stood up on my arm, just stood up. Just I couldn't even dance. I just froze and soaked it all in and watched everybody else dance to it. And paid attention to how it sounded like on the system, and was just really, really grateful for that moment. That was crazy.
Wow. What was the crowd reaction? Were they dancing too?
Oh yeah, totally. But you know what, man? I've always had sort of an esteem problem when it comes to my music, and I guess that's why I still do it, because it's one of those things that I can do, put out to the world, and not necessarily be like, not like, I love positive reactions, and you know, I'm better with negative ones these days, but it's also safe to be able to put especially these days, put your music out. People react to it how they react to it. You just don't know. And you're already on to like the 4th or 5th, 6th project. I'll tell you another story. I remember when Louie had his residency on Hubert Street, he was doing dance switch over there. And I did one of my last records on the House2House. I was already by myself at the time on Strictly Rhythm. Is a record called Latin Soul Thing. And I brought it, and that's when you were able to throw a track on CDR and bring your CDs up. So I brought it up to Louie. Louie plays it right away. And I'm like standing right next to Louie in the booth. And Louie is Louie, you know, he's like locked in. And I'm like, Louie, and the crowd is going crazy. I'm like, Louie, what you think, man? The crowd loves it? The crowd's into it? And he taps me on this, like, the hell's wrong with you? Look at the crowd. What's the matter with you? Look at the crowd. Again, it was another lesson. It was like, man, I gotta check this shit. You know, it's crazy. Like I gotta learn how to just live in the moment and receive, you know? So yeah. So I remember the first time my record was played very, very vividly. Yeah.
Describe what it's like when you just decide to go out dancing and the DJ plays the right song and you're in the zone. You're just like, this is my shit. Describe that feeling.
For me, as a creative, it's inspiring. There's a lot of emotions. There's like, oh my God, this is crazy. And I still react to music this way. It's like a respectful hate. It's like, oh my God. And I could say these things to people who I've befriended. Like I've said this to Spinner. I've said it. I was like, yo, I fucking hate you sometimes, man. Like sometimes your shit is so good that I'm like, I'm questioning why I'm actually doing this, you know? But they know where I'm coming from because they know me and they know that it just means, I'm just saying that I'm inspired, that it's super inspiring and I love what you do. Keep it going because you push me, you know what I mean? So yeah, for me, I know that a lot of people are just like, yeah, I get the track, it's amazing, I get lost, but I wasn't much of a dancer. I was more of a studier. I danced, but I was more of a studier because of the virtue of what I did, both DJing and producing. So I would soak in the atmosphere that way. But when that one track would come on, I was like, oh my God, I gotta make something like this. How do I make something like this that's not like a carbon copy of this though? Like how do I package this feeling, bottle it up and make something that's quintessentially me, you know? And it was always a challenge to go home, turn on my gear and just be locked in. But it was always that moment that I was locked into, you know what I mean? Like and sometimes it wasn't just the song. And this goes back to DJing. It was how that song was presented. It was like the way that record was brought in, or the way, you know, and the marriage between the sound and the light guy, and just the entire moment. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know how to describe it better than that.
I know exactly what you mean. I remember, I think this was like early 2000s when they'd fly me over to Italy to photograph Tony Humphries. And his blends were just butter. The way he would just sick.
Master.
I mean, the way he would just ride records and then like I was always like, I'm like you, like I was always a fan. I'm not really a dancer. I just like to feel the music. And I never really bought vinyl. Didn't have the space for it, so I would just buy the CDs, whatever. But I remember there was one record that he played, and I had to find out what it was. I don't remember what it was, and I bought it, and I went home and played it, and I was like, "This don't sound the way Tony played it."
Right. And then that's that. Just like you would buy that record, bring it home, and you would try to put yourself there, but it was the presentation. And I mean, don't get me, I'm gonna go on a whole rant about what DJs actually do. Like,
no, please do.
Okay, we're presenters. We don't, I mean, everybody was like, when iPods first came out, they were like, why can't I just play an iPod? Well, you can do that, and I'm sure your tastes are incredible, and I'm sure you have a shitload of awesome music on your Spotify playlist. But how do you take that same music that you've heard 1,000 times and repackage it in a way that says, here, I want you to feel it this way. I want you to, I'm gonna make you feel the way you forgot you felt the first time you heard this, you know? And that is what an incredible, especially house DJs, that's what an incredible house DJ does. Because they're not like hip hop DJs. It's not a lot of, there's some technical stuff happening, but it's not like you got to be super quick and learn how to scratch. And I mean, you can add all those things to your set if that's your thing. There are plenty of house DJs that do, and that are nice at it. But really, in a club set, and trying to keep people on that dance floor. It's about being creative with, the same music that you toured for 6 weeks playing, and every DJ has in their crates. Like, how do you repackage it and give everybody that holy shit surprise moment that makes them go crazy over the same thing that they've heard? They know this record, you know? So yeah, to me, that's what DJs do.
100% agree. Are there too many DJs?
That's like saying that there are too many people who play guitar, you know? I used to hate on, you call me, you got me interviewing at the right moment, Louie, my man. I went through a whole, I went through a whole healing experience before this. Yeah, bro. I mean, look, this is something that started with our generation, like hip hop and rapping, and it took off, and it's a thing now, and that's beautiful. And instead of hating, we should be patting ourselves on the back, you know, and just honing in on our own skills and doing what we do. Because there are a lot of DJs now, and it's a lot easier to be recognized because you know, everybody can promote themselves on social media themselves. But as long as, like I said, like same thing with production, as long as you're unique to you and you're listening to that inner voice, then you're always going to sound separate from everybody else, you know? You're always going to play those records that everybody, I know everybody loves this record. Nobody's been playing it out. But guess what I'm going to do tonight? I'm going to play it out, and I'm going to remind you how much you love this record. And people are going to go, oh shit, I love that record. I haven't heard that in a minute, you know? And that's what sets you apart, you know? So, no, there aren't too many DJs. There's probably a lot more coders in the world than there are DJs. It's definitely a lot more lucrative.
Talk to me about music. How do you discover new music?
The old-fashioned way. Lately, I haven't been doing it as much as I used to, but I'm eager to get back out there and go to the shops and support some of the local stores. I've been, before the pandemic, I was going to Sacred Rhythms quite a bit, and that was pretty much my house music go-to spot. A1 for everything else, and a bunch of other spots. So supporting local record shops. I still buy plenty of vinyl. But you know, just like everybody else, I rely on online resources too.
Let's talk about.
I mean, before we go to the next question, what I do miss about that experience was going out, not even knowing if that record that was out, but just asking a bunch of people, yo, what's this? What's that? Blah, blah, blah. And everybody pretending like they're knowing, but they don't either. And then you go to the record shop and you try your best to recreate it in some way, shape, or form. And then, you know, somebody will be like, oh, I know what that was. So-and-so played it last night. Yeah, that's not out yet, blah, 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 blah. So that was another fun way we used to just discover music that I think is honestly, if I have to point out some differences between then and now, it's just lost now. Like, people come out and they support. And yes, there is a scene that's healthy, but I don't know how much people are invested in that way, that just like, well, also the technology is here, right? So you have Shazam, and people are holding up their phones and doing that thing where they're trying to Shazam the track. So I guess that still does exist, but the technology is better. And damn, I wish I had Shazam back in the day.
Yeah. I also like
Bill D, who I used to do a lot of singing to.
should interview him.
You should hit him up. Tell him I said what's up, man.
I don't even know. I don't think we're friends on Facebook. I'm gonna find him. Yeah. Let's talk about. I feel like this may be oversimplification, but I feel like there are two scenes. The house scene bifurcated into underground house, which is us, the underground stuff, and then like EDM.
I think I think it's way more complicated than that. I think there's more than that. I think there's
Tell us.
yeah, I mean, there are a lot of interpretations of what deep house is. Just the word, just the phrase deep house in itself, if you asked 100 different people, if you go to certain festivals, they'll name tracks that you feel are not deep at all, you know, and a lot of that is generational. A lot of that is because we are getting older and kids are getting younger, and they're just into what they're into. And the other part is this, which is my biggest argument, is I hate genres. I hate genres. I'll be honest with you. I hate the fact that what kind of music do you make? I always say I make music. I make music that people dance, that make people nod their head. I make, I guess to some degree, electronic music. But seldom do I say I make house music. And it's not because I'm not proud of it, because I love it as a genre. But when you're a creative, you just get locked in, you know, and you feel confined. So no, there is tons more genres than EDM and deep house. They're just going under those two umbrellas, thankfully, because we don't need 1,000 different versions of genres. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's the whole disco edit thing can be lumped into deep house on both sides of the spectrum. The stuff we like and the newest, you know, the stuff other people like. So yeah, so there's EDM, but there's also 1,000 different perspectives on deep house.
A friend of mine has a thesis that all house music is local, right? Because what we jam to in New York and Brooklyn is different what they'll jam to in Chicago versus, you know, Miami versus LA.
I think that was the case back in the day. I don't think that's the case now. I think the internet brought everybody closer. It's easy to tell what people are doing in New York, in Detroit, and Chicago now. But I mean, I didn't do any traveling by the time I was 13, 14 years old. And if a friend of mine came back from Chicago with a WBMX set, you know, from the Hot Mix 5, I'd be blown away about half the shit they're playing. First off, a lot of stuff that I wouldn't even touch. There's tons of Italo disco and new wave and just really interesting perspectives on dance music that we even had here. Like Latin freestyle was something that they didn't touch, you know? But it was a form of dance music here. So I don't know, and you know, not to diss your friend, I would love to hear his opinion on it, but I don't know if that's necessarily true because, you know, you only had these little cassettes floating around from being passed from New York to Chicago to Detroit. And even in hip hop, it was the same way, to tell the story in glimpses of what was happening somewhere outside of your own, honestly, block. Because, you know, yeah. I mean, I felt like things were different in different boroughs. I felt like the sound in Jersey was inherently different than it was in New York. I felt like you would get a different sound in Baltimore. When you went down to Baltimore, things were different. And I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in some of those clubs in Detroit and in Chicago back in the day. Hell yeah. Ron Hardy, let me, you know, everybody, Ron Hardy this, Ron Hardy that, you know, most people in my generation who do this for real didn't discover Ron Hardy until, like, honestly, maybe mid to late 90s. And then after that, you probably didn't have access to his mixes until the late 90s when they were being posted online. Because why? The internet, period. I didn't know anybody with an authentic Ron Hardy tape from the Music Box. You got a lot of liars out there, but I didn't.
I love it. I love it. Twitch. Everyone's DJing on Twitch these days.
Yeah.
How you feel about that?
I feel it's fine, man. I feel like you have to adapt. I I feel like if you're going to keep this thing going and eventually pass the torch to a younger generation, then you have to feed it to them in the way they want to be fed. Okay. I feel that there may come a time where that person who caught your set on Twitch religiously ends up in New York and might want to come check you live. You know, I feel that those are the things, those are the tools that just weren't available to us, which kept things pretty, which gave things a mystique and kept things underground. See, to me, the underground doesn't even exist anymore. The very virtue of underground meant that there was just limited access to it. You had to be there. I mean, that was kind of our motto. You had to be there. You had to know about it. Now you don't have to be there. Now you can be there virtually and be fine. So yeah, DJs, do your thing, man. And I get to personally, discover different perspectives without leaving the comfort of my own home, because frankly, I ain't out there like that, like I used to, you know. But these kids, the younger generation who do subscribe to Twitch, do both. They'll follow their favorite DJs and they'll support the scene physically, which is a beautiful thing to me. So go get it, man. You know, the older heads are jumping on and I love it. Yeah, go get that shit.
Residencies. How important is a DJ residency in establishing one's career?
I miss them. I miss them so much, man. Again, like I don't complain. And again, DJs, get your money, go get those bookings. I think this is more of a promoter argument, because I think promoters back in the older days were more visionary in terms of what they wanted their parties, what they wanted their clubs, what they wanted their rooms to feel like on a consistent basis. And there was only one way to do that. You had to stick with a resident or group of residents and not necessarily deviate from that. So when you think of certain rooms, I mean, when you think of the Paradise Garage, you think of one DJ, right? When you think of Sound Factory Bar, you think of one DJ, and the list goes on, not just in New York, but overseas too. So while I'm not trying to take anybody's money away and food off their plate, I feel I would like to see more promoters who are brave enough to say, no, this is my core. I hear something. I feel something. I think I could do it with this group. It's like building a team, like building an NBA team, you know, like you trust in their abilities. You trust that what they bring to the table is going to give your party, your brand, a certain personality, and you stick with it. And conversely, I got no problems with, having access to your favorite DJ who you don't get to hear come to town and listening to he or she play. But, there are a hell of a lot of DJs in the course of the night these days. And some of them get it right. Some of them get it right. A lot of them fuck it up, because booking DJs for a night is an extension of DJing itself. It's an extension of DJing itself. You have to think like a DJ in order to book DJs. And you have to know who's going to be your best opener, who's going to be your best middleman, who's going to be your best closer. And you make those bookings accordingly. But now it's not about that at all. It's about your follow accounts and your influences online and your profile and how, that sort of thing. So yeah, of course, Carl Cox is going to go last. Of course, if Louie and Carl Cox are on the bill, then Carl Cox will go last. But if I'm on the bill with Louie, then Louie's going to go last. I'll probably open. A lot of times, the DJs that are on the bill should be on the bill again. That's just that's just my opinion. I could be wrong. There could be different opinions out there, but that's mine.
I love it. What effect did COVID have on our scene?
Oh man, it brought everything to a screeching halt, but it made a lot of guys creative, and it a lot of dudes took to Twitch and really kept things going, and that was inspiring to see. You know, we've survived worse. I mean, I've seen New York come to a screeching halt on 9/11, and then a week later, certain DJs trying to throw benefit parties. I didn't go to any of those, but I mean, I couldn't bring myself to even think music, but that's how strong the pull is, you know. And we landed back on our feet. So it did you know, bring things to a halt in a lot of ways, but things are also picking back up, and that's really dope to see.
What is your intention when you produce a track?
My intention is to please me. Like, I make tracks for me. I make music for me. I make music to challenge myself. I make the kind of thing I want to feel what I feel when I hear something that inspires me to go into the studio to begin with. That's all I expect. That's it. And then I put it out and I share it with the world. I say, hey, you know, what do you think? But frankly, that's it. That's all I expect. I go and I create the way a painter creates, the way some writers create, I guess. You know, I go in and I try to make something that impresses me first, you know.
What do you want your musical legacy to be?
I haven't really given that much thought. I guess being known as somebody who was, I guess, true to my own sound, who used New York as a muse, and yeah, really just took to those early days of New York City street music culture, because I like to use that word, because to me, house music was street music. Disco was street music. Reggae is street music. Hip hop is street music. Techno is street music. And but I don't know Chicago's perspective, and salute to them. I wish I did. I'm jealous. Same for Detroit, but I do know New York's, and I do remember what I felt just listening to these radio shows from Tony Humphries, Dove and Disciple, and switching genres. You know, Stretch and Bobbito, and you know, Mr. Magic and Red Alert. You know, and and then going outside my home in the projects and seeing all of that culture right there in front of me first, before even experiencing it in trendy, awesome Manhattan, Soho, Village, East Village, West Village, you know, all of the clubs. Before that, just being in love with these underground sounds that weren't what my parents were listening to, and going outside, and it felt like everybody was like, this is our secret, you know? This is ours. Everything, our culture is ours. Don't worry about what everybody else is. This is gonna blow up and everybody's gonna want a piece of it, but this is ours. And that's really what I tap into. So hopefully my legacy can be something along the lines of, yeah, you know, his sound kind of reflects all those things.
That's awesome. When you hear other producers, either up and coming or established, what's a common production mistake you see or hear that's just like, why do you do that?
Mistake, but stuff that I try to stay away from, like cliches. You know, I think after a while, with any genre, they get settled. First off, I have to say that I don't think there's a right or wrong way to make music, especially, you know, these people. There's plenty of people that have nothing but cliches, what I would consider cliches on their music, that are doing wildly better than I am. So these are just my opinions, not necessarily the recipe for success. But
Explain what you mean by cliche.
I'll give you an obvious one in EDM. It's safe because I won't be attacking anybody I know who does music like I do. But I guess the build. Like if I did that music, I would be so on a mission to find another way to make people feel to make people feel that drop, that whatever the hell they feel, because personally I think that's all acted anyway. But I would just look for another way to do that, rather than just do what everybody else is doing. So, and in a lot of ways, the 4/4 kick, which is the heartbeat of house music, is a cliche, right? So yeah, I try my best to like pull away from a lot of that. And I wish that, and I think the way to do that is just to challenge yourself. Really, that's how that works. Try to find other ways to say what you're trying to say without doing the same thing 1,000 times. After a while, I personally get bored as an artist. So.
What the hell happened to New York? It used to be the underground mecca. There were parties 7 nights a week. And then,
yeah.
What happened?
Yo, we got a whole Moena. I'm gonna keep it 1,000. The people that used to, first off, real estate happened, okay? Real estate, okay? When you got these boxes that are paying nothing in mortgage, and rich billionaire tycoon wants to build this high rise with a school on the bottom, your club's gonna probably be the first thing to go. And even if it stays, how much do you think the tenants are going to tolerate that? So I mean, Manhattan is turning into the rich people playground. They're having a hard time trying to sell a lot of those apartments, but I think they'll get there. And then everybody wants to live in Brooklyn because they just do, I guess. And it's more of the same. Just a lot of high rises going up for the elite. So that's one thing. That's one thing that happened to the underground in Manhattan. And slowly it's happened in Brooklyn, and it's pushed a lot of the underground that was happening in Brooklyn away. We don't have places like Output anymore, which was an amazing space. It was an amazing space. And we see a lot of places popping up in the outskirts of Brooklyn, like Eastern Queens and Ridgewood. We have Nowadays, and we have just a couple of other places. So it's starting to affect what's happening in Brooklyn too. So what happened to the underground is what always happens. It's money. The lack of money and hardship starts underground culture, and affluence kills it. It kills it. It's like, and they come here for it. They come here because they want what New York has to offer on some like, I don't know, just gritty level, I guess, and they want to be real. They want to do something real. They want to experience something real. But when they get here, you realize that the building you live in, the apartment that you bought, in the building you live in, CBGBs had to give up their lot for that, But that's the one thing you wish you could have experienced. But guess what? You can't. So, yeah, man, money happened to the underground in New York, and is happening to the underground, but it'll resurface in some form.
My last question, what advice would you give to the next generation of DJs and producers?
Be patient, man. Wait for it. A lot of you guys, the successful ones, are doing your thing. You really start to do your thing when you get older, though. You really start to flourish as an artist, and listen to your inner voice more in your older age. So stick with it, keep doing it, and know that you're not done. And don't get too ahead of yourself either, because there's more to come. And just keep championing it, you know?
One more question about production. Do you, when you mention experimentation, do you start and finish a track, or do you have 10 ideas and 10 stems and then you work on stuff? This one will take 2 months, this one may take 2 years. And I have 700 unfinished tracks on my hard drive. Like,
yeah, all of that. I'll start something and maybe I'll whip something up in 15 minutes. That gives me that oh shit moment. Like, okay. And then I stop. I gotta walk away. I'll turn it off. I'll go do something else. I will walk my dog, play with my kid, talk to my wife, whatever I gotta do, go for a run. And then I'll hear it again. And then it's like, okay, I can build off of this and keep going. So that's one way. And yeah, so that's actually the main way, to be honest. That's exactly what'll happen. And then sometimes if my inner voice says like, okay, this is good, but it's got to go somewhere, I'll start a completely new project with those elements and keep going from there. And you can actually listen to the natural progression of your ideas as you keep going forward. So it also gives you a certain perspective on how you think, you know, where you went with these elements before you were like, this is good, I'm good. So that's really, that's a big part of my technique, yeah, of the way I write, is I'll start something, it's raw, I'll stop, go back, I'll listen, and then I'll keep building. And then in each tier, each idea, it's a brand new thing before it like becomes what it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Awesome. Those are the questions that I had. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to talk about?
That I want to talk about? I mean, I think you hit everything, bro. You know.
What's next for Son of Sound?
I'm like really excited to get my label going again. I have some artists who are waiting in the wings. I'm going to be releasing a couple of projects from a jazz duo in the UK called According to the Sound. It's actually up on my Bandcamp now. And it's more of a down-tempo experimental hip hop thing, and Spinner blessed me with the awesome remix, a hip hop remix. And I'm going to be doing some vinyl releases of that, some 7 inches of that. And then I have a few more artists whose tracks I'm going to be releasing as well. So that's that. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm working on a full length. It's going to be, it's not just going to be house, it's going to be an amalgam of my influences on this project. So, you know, to me, I feel like we're at a stage where we can do whatever the hell we want, and I'm going to. So I'm going to be doing that. And I'm going to be doing a lot more ghost producing some hip hop stuff. So yeah.
Oh.
Stuff for that, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know you did that.
Yeah, I did that, but I'm actually not going to just be ghosting anymore. I'm going to be, I'm aiming myself to be full on credited. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, cool. And then your record label is called
District 30.
District 30. Cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. It was great to catch up as always.
Oh, all right, dope, man. Thank you for this, brother. It was dope catching up with you, man.
Likewise. Great to see you again. Have a good night.
All right.